Auspicious start. Ian LeGros. I'm joined with Jeff, Eldon, and Dan. We are going to give you a demo-laden talk this morning. And to kick it off, I want to start by saying Windows Server 2025 is generally available. Scott talked about that in his keynote. We announced it on November 1st. And this would not be possible if it wasn't for the help from all our customers, folks like you. So a two-part thank you. First part is thank you for helping us get there. This is the first release where we had a Windows Insider program for Server, similar to what we do for Windows 11, where we have simple build-to-build upgrades, and so you can sort of get on the Windows Insider train, and then every time a build comes out, just hit update, no need to reinstall. Made it a lot easier, we got a lot more usage, and that really helps us validate the product and ensure that it is highest quality possible when we launch it. So thank you all for that help. Thank you as well for being our customers and trusting us to provide this critical infrastructure for you. There are thousands and thousands of customers around the world that rely on Windows Server to run their operations. Thousands of customers that are using our latest features both for on-prem as well as in the cloud. And this is built on 30 years of innovation. I started my career actually using Windows NT 3.5.1. Anybody in the audience remember that one? That is a lot more than I expected. So it was my, yes. It was my developer desktop. I was a developer. I started out there. And that's the origin of Windows Server. And so every time we release, we're putting new innovation. And that innovation comes from feedback we get, feedback from all of our partners, all of our customers on where do we invest, where do we put our energy. And this release is no different. We've really focused on feedback and delivering what is needed to help drive us in this century. A few important things we've really heard. Nothing surprising here. Almost 3/4 of folks that we talk to have hybrid infrastructure. So hybrid, where you have a durable on-prem estate, as well as work that you're running in the cloud. And of those folks running work in the cloud, which is most, that we see that 89% are multi-cloud. And so we really factor that in as we think about Windows Server. A heavy emphasis on how to make sure we're giving you everything you need for your on-prem systems. Bringing technologies from Azure on-prem. You heard Scott talk about some of that this morning with our hot patching, which we're really excited about. And then AI, you know, it's funny, I had a number there before, but it kept changing every 20 minutes. And so I figure it's pretty much everybody's thinking about AI. And so what do we do for that with Windows Server? We want to make sure that you can get the most out of your infrastructure. Spending a lot on GPUs, they're a really precious commodity. How do we help you get the most out of those? And so that's where GPU partitioning comes from. So bringing that on-prem. Again, another technology that we innovated on in Azure, and we're making it available to everybody wherever you need to use it. Next, I want to invite Jeff up on stage. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Ian. Thank you.
Jeff is a key part of our team. There are thousands of folks that make Windows Server possible. Jeff's constantly talking to customers, meeting with folks.
Yes.
Doing briefings on site.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
And hybrid cloud is a huge part of that, and multi-cloud is a huge part of that, and we understand just what customers are looking for in Windows Server to meet those needs.
Exactly, because we're hearing a lot about, hey, I need to look at how I virtualize. I want some options there, and we're focused on that. So we're talking about what we're doing there to bring more scale to our virtualization platform, as well as whatever you happen to be running in the cloud, either public cloud or running yourself as VMs in your infrastructure. Now, we do tons of surveys, we collect a lot of data, and the top 5 things we heard about are right here. And I think we're going to talk about a lot of this morning.
We're absolutely going to go through this today, yes.
So patching. Scott talked about it. We're excited about it. Going from having to patch 12 times a year to 4 times a year is a pretty big deal.
Really huge deal. We introduced it in Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition, and people could not get enough of it. I mean, I'm not kidding. It is clearly the #1 requested feature, and it was at the top of the list when we surveyed our customers and said, what do you want to see in the next Windows Server release? Easier patching, #1 by far.
Yes. So we're going to see it already. Saw the keynote. We'll talk about some more this morning. We have enhanced security features, more hybrid capabilities, Upgrade process is a cool one.
Yes, yes.
And then we have improvements across the stack. Networking is one of them, but across the whole stack, supporting more cores, more memory, incredible amounts that we are doing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ian.
All
really
right,
appreciate
thanks.
it. Thank you very much, Ian. Ian LeGros, Vice President, Windows Server. I'm really excited. We have such a packed agenda. In fact, I brought a couple of my colleagues with me. Eldon and Dan will be out shortly. The agenda today, we would definitely want to talk about hot patching and servicing. You saw it today. It was in a couple of the demos in Scott's keynote. It was also, there was a mention in there in Satya's as well. We'll talk about hot patching and servicing. AD, huge changes and advancements in Active Directory in Windows Server 2025. Super excited about that. High performance infrastructure, whether it's Hyper-V, whether it's storage, whether it's compute, whether it's networking, across the entire board, massive improvements in 2025, as well as a modern server experience. We have a ton of content, so I'm getting right to it. Let's start with hot patching and servicing. As I mentioned, this is the #1 customer requested feature by a country mile. It's not even close. Okay, after 2022 Azure Edition was released, like pretty much every single day, one's like, I need this everywhere. I need this everywhere. I need this outside of Azure. I need this on physical machines. I need this on virtual machines. I need this in other clouds. So we can install security patches without rebooting with hot patching. And it modifies in-memory running processes. So you don't have to restart a process. You don't have to restart a server. It's the same technology we've actually used. It's been battle-hardened in Azure for years that we brought into Windows Server. And the beauty of hot patching is the moment the patch is complete, it's actually secure at that moment. So with Windows Server 2025, to enable it everywhere, we're introducing ARC-enabled hot patching. And this means if you ARC-enable Windows Server Standard, Windows Server Data Center, this doesn't need to be Azure Edition. This can be running on premises. It can be running on physical. It can be running on virtual. It can be running in other clouds. Once you ARC enable it, you can then enable it via the Azure portal. We will continue to offer the Azure Edition for Azure Stack HCI, Azure Local, and Azure. That will continue to be, hot patching will be included at no additional cost. But for ARC enabled, there will be a monthly subscription. All right, enough talk. Let's show it. So the beauty of hot patching is in this chatbot AI demo, I'm actually going to patch both the front-end server and the back-end server in real time. Okay? So what we're doing here is we're hot patching them both. And again, no need to restart a process, no need to restart the server. Okay? It happens in memory for these running processes. The moment the patch is complete, you are secure, because the patch has taken hold, as opposed to a traditional LCU or latest cumulative update, which would require a restart to actually get the security benefits. With here, we've actually patched running in-memory processes. We've gone from version 22.27 to 23.08 without any interruption. And again, this could be chatbot, this could be SQL Server, this could be Exchange. I've spoken to a lot of customers, actually, that are excited about this for SQL Server on physical machines, because they tell me, Jeff, I've got a 4-node cluster for this massive SQL Server, and guess what? Each one of these servers has a terabyte of RAM. Well, do you know how long it takes to reboot a server with a terabyte of RAM? It's a half an hour at least. You got 4 terabytes of RAM, go get a cup of coffee. So if I told you, you don't have to reboot that every month, but only 4 times a year, you can practically see the little tears swelling up in their eyes when you talk to SQL Server admins. So it's extremely powerful. Now, the way hot patching works is we will deliver a baseline. So for example, here's a January baseline. February and March are delivered as hot patches. There's no rebooting. Then we synchronize in April for a baseline. So what do I mean by synchronize? A hot patch is a security patch only. There's only a security payload in there. There's no features, there's no optional components, there's nothing but security payload in a hot patch, okay? We then synchronize that once a quarter. But between those, you're not rebooting, okay? So that's the beauty of hot patching. Now, every time I talk about hot patching, someone says, oh my gosh, this is Jeff, this is awesome. I need to get to 2025 as soon as possible. Is there anything you've done to make upgrades even easier? Yes. For the first time ever in Windows Server, we are taking advantage of a technology the Windows Client team has had for many years. With Windows Client, you could go from 7 to 8 to 10 to 11, all from Windows Update. For the first time ever, we're enabling this for Windows Server 2025. So it's called a feature update. So if you're using Windows Server 2019 or 2022, there's an option that'll be available to go into Windows Update that you can update directly to 2025, making upgrades the easiest it's ever been. And you'll notice, I do want to point this out, we will not push this update. You actually have to go actively present this. You have to click on the download and install. You'll see there's additional text. There's a second option to accept and install. You've got to go through it. We will never push server upgrades, just to be super clear about this. All right? Another big change, another big huge change for upgrades is N-4 media upgrade support, something we've never had in Windows Server before. It's always been N-2. With N-4 media upgrade support, what we're saying is if you use the media, whether it's a physical DVD or an ISO file on a virtual machine, if you click on Setup from Windows Server, we'll go as far back as 2012 R2. That's N-4. All the way back to 2012 R2, double-click on Setup, and you'll do an in-place upgrade to 2025. And rather than talk about it, let me show it to you. So in this demo, I've got 4 virtual machines. One's running 2012 R2, the other one's running 2016, the one on the bottom left is running 2019, and the one on the bottom right is running 2022. And I'm going to actually patch all of these. I'm going to upgrade all of these to 2025. So I go up and I click Setup on each one of these. I did this all in real time, by the way, on my system, all running Hyper-V. All 4 of them running. The only thing I did was speed it up because we didn't have enough time. But you can see on the left-hand side, there goes 2012 R2. Up in the upper right-hand side, there goes 2016. And the lower left-hand side is 2019. And the lower right-hand side is 2022. And boom, just like that, all upgraded to Windows Server 2025 using the N-4 media upgrade. Really cool stuff here, making it as easy as possible to get you to the latest and greatest. As a reminder, of course, whenever you're doing any sort of action like this, make sure you're fully patched to the latest version of the OS before you do the upgrade, doing the media upgrade. And of course, always do backups and snapshots. All you IT pros know this, but I'm just going to say this out loud because of course you should do this. That's just good sysadmin hygiene. Finally, with all of this talk about hot patching and ARC-enabled features, people want to know, well, what have you done to make ARC enabling a server easier? Well, we actually put in an inbox wizard. There's a number of ways you can ARC enable servers. You can do it via PowerShell. You can do it via automation to do it at scale. But a lot of people want to kick the tires and maybe just want to do it on a few at a time. No problem. There's an easy wizard, literally walk you through the steps. It'll install the agent, register it with Azure, and boom, even though that server is running on premises, on your hardware, in your data center, in your branch office, in your location, it appears in the Azure portal. I can now enable hot patching. I can now secure it with Azure Policy. I can monitor it. I can deliver governance. I can use Defender for Cloud. And Azure Portal becomes a way to manage all of my resources wherever they reside. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it off to my buddy Eldon. Eldon, let's talk about Active Directory.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. So press your friends. Press your family. Everybody's seeing, go home, simultaneously upgrade every Windows server to 25 at the same time. Yeah? Yeah? You can do that? Might have a job the next day, I don't know, but all right, let's talk about Active Directory. Super important infrastructure I'm sure all of you are using. So we got some exciting changes coming in Windows Server 2025. So first off, just security. So a lot of security enhancements. You're going to hear me talk about this around Active Directory. You're going to hear me talk about it around SMB. So just a lot of support for the new encryption algorithms, encryption and cryptography, support for TLS 1.3. So a lot of new security enhancements just in general with Active Directory in Windows Server 2025. Also some scalability improvements. So AD uses a JET database, and it's for the last 20 years has uses 8K pages. And so now we've increased that to 32. What that really means, so what does that really mean from a value perspective, is about a 3x scalability improvement. So that's a significant improvement. Now I'm going to talk about upgrade requirements in a second. So it does require getting to a 2025 domain functional level for this functionality. So I'm just kind of warning you to some stuff in here that you are going to have to do some functional and level upgrades to take advantage of. So performance and scalability improvements. So now we have support for NUMA with domain controllers with the ADDS role, and so that's going to give you increased performance. We also now have support for greater than 64 logical processors, so that's going to give you that scalability. So we got some nice improvements that's going to give you some perf and scale improvements in 25. So we also have this new account, this new machine account called a delegated managed service account. And so that allows you to have a service account that is fully managed, which has randomized keys. And then it creates a direct link between the device identity and the managed account, and that's the only way authentication is going to happen. So this is a new type of account that's available in Windows Server 2025. And we also have another new capability is about being able to set a boost on an individual, priority boost on a replication link. So imagine you deploy a new domain controller, right? And you want to boost the replication priority on that individual DC, or you are having trouble, you're troubleshooting a domain controller, you want to boost that individual one. So now you have some fine-grained control when you need to get a domain controller in sync. So keeping a curb. So Bobby Boucher says NTLM's evil, right? So we want to try to stay away from NTLM and negotiate down to NTLM as little as possible. I'm going to talk about this. We got a bunch of improvements in SMB and a few slides coming up, but we also have some improvements around Active Directory. So we have IA Curb, which allows you to effectively proxy through another client. So imagine you have a server or a machine which needs to authenticate, and you want to keep it on Kerberos. You don't want to negotiate down to NTLM, and it doesn't have line-of-sight visibility of a domain controller. So this will allow it to actually proxy through another server which has visibility to a domain controller to keep it on a Kerberos authentication. Now, building on IA Curb is local KDC. So local KDC allows you to do Curb authentication using IA Curb for local accounts. So you're doing Kerberos authentication with local accounts. So again, trying to negotiate down to NTLM as little as possible. So upgrading. So let's talk about upgrading. So there is a new 25 force functional level and a domain functional level. You can upgrade your domain controllers to 25 as long as your functional level is at least at 16. In Windows Server 2016 domain functional level, you can add a 25 DC into your domain. So as long as you're there, you're good, and you can start adding in the you can start upgrading domain controllers to 25. Now, in order to take advantage, I talked about like that scalability improvement a few minutes ago about getting to 32K and basically 3x scalability on your JET database. You do need to be at a 25 domain functional level for that. So just kind of giving a heads up. So that's around upgrading. All right, with that, I'm going to bring out Dan, who's going to talk about Hyper-V.
Thanks, Eldon. You know, more than ever, companies are looking for a new hypervisor. And one of the most common questions we get is whether or not Hyper-V and Windows Server can meet your needs. And before I go too far in, I'll just answer the question. It's an unequivocal yes. Hyper-V is a strategic Microsoft technology. It powers our hyperscale Azure Cloud, Microsoft 365, and Azure SQL. It's also built into our premier edge solution, Azure Stack, and Windows Server. It powers our Windows client technologies, does container isolation, and it's even used in Xbox. So as you can see, Hyper-V is kind of woven into the fabric at Microsoft. And all of these platforms rely on Hyper-V to provide a reliable, performant, and scalable virtualization platform. And these are demanding workloads. Here's a picture of Task Manager of one of the VMs in Azure. This is a massive VM, right? 30 terabytes of RAM, not gigabytes, 30 terabytes of RAM, 1,792 virtual processors. And this is, Jeff likes to joke, this is not even the biggest one we have, right? This is just one we do every day, right? It's some of the biggest workloads on the planet running on Azure. And these scalability requirements are on Hyper-V. And so that's what's coming to you in Windows Server 2025. For the host, we now support up to 4 petabytes of RAM. 4 petabytes of RAM. 2,048 logical processors, allowing you to scale up your workloads if that's what your workloads need. And individual VMs can now be scaled up to 240 terabytes of RAM and 2,048 virtual processors per VM. Again, we have to put asterisks here because we frequently get asked questions if I made a typo there. It's not gigabytes or terabytes, it's petabytes, right? That's kind of what we're dealing with here. So that scale. And that's in Windows Server 2025 available at the edge. There's no other hypervisor that's available on the market for you in your data center that can reach these scalability limits. And we didn't stop with scalability. We brought a litany of new features and scenarios to Hyper-V across the board, including dynamic processor compatibility, high availability and live migration for workgroup-based clusters. We brought file system improvements to our REFS, or our resilient file system, with native deduplication and compression. And we brought some great network management improvements with network ATC and accelerated networking. And of course, as Ian mentioned, most of us are looking at AI and interested in experimenting with AI, and that's all relying on GPUs. You might be even using VDI in your environment. That's also going to be using GPUs. And so we brought a litany of new features, including GPU-P, like GPU partitioning, and discrete device assignment for GPUs. So let's take a quick look at GPU-P. GPU-P uses a well-known technology called SRIOV, a single root I/O virtualization. You've probably heard of this from the networking world, which has used that for a long time. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But GPU-P allows you to divide up a GPU and partition it and hand out portions of that GPU to individual virtual machines. Again, you can manage this with PowerShell or Windows Admin Center. And we do have support with GPU-P for live migration and high availability through failover clustering. Let's take a look at this in action. So here's a Hyper-V host that's running a bunch of different virtual machines. At the bottom, you can see we're remote desktoped into one of those virtual machines. That's doing some graphics processing. It's getting about 40 frames per second. I have a host on the left, which is currently running this virtual machine. And we're going to initiate a live migration. Now, as that live migration continues, we're going to go back to the CPU on the host. You can see it's using that CPU. And it's starting to move some of that workload over to the new host. You can start to see a sliver there of the CPU coming back. Now, really focus in here on the video. And what you'll see is it just seamlessly migrates over. There it goes. The CPU is just dropped completely off on the left-hand side. It's now fully running on the right-hand side. No drop in performance on the video. That's all seamless migration without missing a beat there with GPU-P. Now let's take a look at the storage and networking improvements before I pass it back to Eldon to talk about SMB and failover clustering. So first, NVMe is the newest generation of disk drives, and you're no doubt looking at or considering these drives for your own data center. They bring substantial performance improvements across the board in terms of IOPS and CPU savings, latency. And in Windows Server 2025, out of the box, NVMe devices will natively get 60% more IOPS. Nothing you have to do. That works with upgrades. Whether you go N-4, doesn't matter. All the way through. You'll get 60% out of the box, more I/O on those NVMe drives, so long as you have device capacity there, right? So if your device is limited, you're not going to get any more, of course. But if your device has I/O capacity, we will consume that. You'll get just native 60% more improvement there. We also made some improvements to storage replica, improving that performance for volume-to-volume replication. Compression is now available in all Windows Server editions. We made, as I mentioned earlier, we have built-in deduplication and compression on our resilient file system. And that, in large portions, again, this is what really matters, is the savings you're going to get. With virtualization workloads, you can save up to about 90% of your storage capacity using deduplication. And file servers are going to save around 60%. Storage spaces, which leverages our resilient file system and gains the benefit of that dedupe and compression, well, you now have the ability to do thin provisioning there. We have a tunable repair and resync, which allows you to optimize either the repair options to expedite the repair options or performance of your virtual machines. You can tune that. It's a slider. It's got about 5 clicks there. And you can move it across that and optimize whichever works for you in your business. And finally, Storage Spaces now supports stretch clustering. So now let's go on to the new network capabilities. There's been significant advantages in management and simplicity of networking. First, one of the top features from Azure Stack HCI, Network ATC, is now available in Windows Server 2025. Network ATC auto-deploys the latest Microsoft best practices and eliminates configuration drift through a one-command cluster-wide configuration. Network HUD integrates seamlessly with Network ATC to simplify the diagnostics of issues with NICs, cabling, or even your physical switches. And it gives you clear prescriptive alerts or auto remediation. And finally, accelerated networking brings intelligent management and tuning for network-based SRIOV, which reduces your host CPU processing, increasing your host density. So you can pack more virtual machines onto that individual host, onto each individual host. It also reduces your network latency and jitter. So again, if you have the GPUP workloads that are there, latency is a big deal there. And so this will help you manage that. This is a game-changing lineup for network management in Windows Server 2025. And our SDN stack also got some improvements and great updates. First, network controllers now installed in under 5 minutes as a failover cluster resource on the host. So there's no more special VMs you need to deploy and manage. We have a secure by default approach with default network security group policies for all virtual machines. So when you deploy that virtual machine, you know it's secure right out of the gate. No network traffic can penetrate there. And SDN multi-site enables native layer 2 and layer 3 across sites, so you don't have to change IPs when a virtual machine moves site to site. And we're not down there, so now I'm going to pass it back over to Eldon, and he's going to take us through some of the failover clustering and SMB stuff.
All right. Thanks, Dan. So now we're going to talk about clustering. This is like near and dear to my heart. So I told Dan, I'm doing the cluster side. I don't care what you think. So I'm coming back out for this one. So let's just talk a little bit about what's happening at clustering in 25. So one I want to talk about is support for workgroup clusters for Hyper-V. And what this really is about resiliency. So when I say like workgroup clusters or AD list clusters, sometimes we'll refer to it as, it's really about making clusters more resilient. And the more we can make clusters not have dependencies on external entities, the higher availability of the solution. So what this is that the cluster can now, what it couldn't do before is that you could deploy a cluster and we could authenticate things like cluster shared volumes and like store spaces direct. We use SMB connections and we have these internal accounts that we use for doing authentication between the nodes. The one thing you couldn't do was a live migration. And so that kind of makes a Hyper-V cluster pretty worthless if you can't actually live migrate those VMs around. So that's new in 25, and so now you can deploy those clusters. So imagine you got one out at a remote branch office. You don't want to have a DC local, and you don't want to have to worry about that if that if that WAN connection to that remote site goes down, that it can't now all of a sudden not function. So this is about making clusters more resilient. So I'm not trying to tell you go deploy clusters without, you don't need domains like, I did the DC slides a second ago. So I love AD. So just that's kind of what that is. So the increasing resiliency of clusters. The other thing that's new is we've been doing major enhancements around clusterware updating. So clusterware updating is the ability to do patch orchestration of your clusters. If you're not using clusterware updating today, I strongly encourage you to. So basically clusterware updating will do is it will take a node, it will pause it, it will drain it, move all those VMs off cleanly. Once that node is cleaned and there's no workloads run on it, it will patch it, it will reboot it, it'll wait till it comes back up, and then it will resume it and move some VMs back, and then serially work its way through the entire cluster and update all the clusters. So the enhancement in Windows Server 2025 was we now support OS upgrades. So Jeff was talking about a second ago that you can do OS upgrades, either you can do media-based upgrades, you can also do Windows Update-based updates. So clusterware updatings will pull from either Windows Update, or it can pull from a media-based update, like if you want to do an N-4. So you can now do that with clusterware updating. So some SME improvements. So just kind of a little bit of a philosophical change, I'm going to call it. So in the past, we've always, we are trying to make the OS secure by default, right? And just in our overall, increasing our overall security posture. I talked about with Active Directory, supporting new algorithms and encryption and cryptography. But one of the things that we're doing around SMB is, again, we don't want you to negotiate down to NTLM. We want to try to keep it curb as much as possible. And we're also changing some of the defaults. We're being a little bolder. In the past, we would always say, you know what, always, in this debate, right? There's a debate, left or right. Which way do you want to go? One is app compat, and the other one is security. And if you go lock things down, there becomes a risk of breaking app compat. So I just want to give you a little bit of a disclaimer that in the past releases, we've always said app compat. And this time we said, you know what? It shouldn't be that if when you just click next, 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 and you install Windows Server, it should be in a secure configuration. So we are changing our philosophy a little bit. And this may cause you a little bit of heartburn at times, so I just want to give you a heads up on this. Like, for example, let me talk about SMB signing. SMB signing has been there for a long time. It's always been disabled. One of the things we changed in Windows Server 25, it's now enabled by default. Now, if you just go upgrade your servers, talk about upgrades, we're going to preserve whatever settings you had in the past. But I just want to make you guys aware, and everybody aware here, that when you go deploy your first Windows Server 25 from scratch, from green, you do a fresh, clean install, some of those defaults are going to be a little different. One of them is SMB signing. So you got your Win 11 clients and your Win 25 servers or Windows servers that are capable of talking with SMB signing. They're all going to start talking SMB signing. That might cause some interop issues with some Linux clients. Just letting you know. Let's see, what else do I have to talk? We locked down some more of the firewalls. So in the past, we'd always say, leave all those firewalls plumbed just in case somebody needs them. So for example, SMB1 is no longer installed by default. You can add it back if you really, really want it. You got maybe some old printer or some old and crusty that you need to do it. But we no longer, so we've said SMB1 is no longer there. Let's not plumb all the ports in the firewall. Let's try to make things more secure by default. And so those are just some of the changes we're starting to make. And I just want to kind of give some things that our goal is to be secure by default. And so it's just kind of a new way that we're moving. And NTLM, you can do things through SMB, like disable NTLM completely if you want to. You can control the negotiate protocols, so you can control what flavors of dialects of SMB do you want to talk. I only want SMB3. I only want encryption, SMB encryption. I don't want any NTLM. You can now have all fine-tuned control of all those. Now, most of those, even though we've introduced a lot of knobs, a lot of them are still disabled by default, but we're empowering you to turn those on if you want to, and then we're giving guidance on how to enable those. So another thing that we've introduced just in the security posture is that we have some new brute force attack prevention. And basically that's just throttling the number of SMB authentication requests. So if somebody's going to do a brute force attack against your server, we are now just going to insert a little bit of delay. It's 2 seconds by default. You can control it, make it whatever you want it to be. We got the PowerShell configuration there, settings, so if you want to go change it. But just an example with the, I just got a little graph there. So if someone was to attempt a brute force attack and wanted to do 90,000 password attempts. In the past, that would be accomplished in 5 minutes. But just with us throttling down how fast we will respond to a password authentication, think in the context of a user, it's going to take 3,000 minutes now with Windows Server 25. So again, we're just trying to mitigate those kind of brute force attacks. And then all these things I'm talking about have group policy. So we're trying to make it simple. We're trying to make it easy. Not going to have to go like hacking the registry and doing crazy stuff. So we're trying to expose things that are manageable and also fleet management that you can deploy across your entire environment, your entire data center, all your Windows servers. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to bring Jeff back out.
Thank you, Eldon. How's everybody doing? Oh, come on, we can do better than that. How's everybody doing? Come on. Having a ball today. I'm so glad. There's so many things we're talking about: security, storage, networking, Hyper-V, GPUs, AI. But I'd be remiss if I actually went by modern server experience. It was really kind of funny when I talked about Windows Server 2025 for the first time, and I showed off, by the way, we want to be consistent with Windows. Everyone was like, oh, yeah, it looks like Doesn't look like 2019 or 2022 or 2016. No, we got rid of the old Windows 10 experience, the old Windows 10 look and shell. It's nice to have the Windows 11 shell. It's nice to have the easy to find everything in my system settings and consistent. I'm super happy with that. A little minor thing in the start menu. It may be a little thing to you, but I'm excited about this. We've got some new apps in here. Of course, we've got the Azure Arc setup. We've got the Feedback Hub. This may sound like a silly little thing, but I've been kind of jealous because clients has had this for years. With the Feedback Hub, people will say, hey, Jeff, how do I submit a feature request? Like, I want to get into a feature into the next version of Windows Server. Well, now I can point you right there and say, check out the option to suggest a feature. And when you do, that comes to folks like myself and Eldon and Dan and Ian, and we can check those out, and we all review these together. And we really, really, really want you to take advantage of it. So please, take advantage of the Feedback Hub, which is new in Windows Server 2025. In addition, we also have Windows Terminal. This is something, again, that's been in client for a while, and I'm so excited that we finally have this in Windows Server 2025. With each tab, thank you, with each tab you can decide, do I want this to be a PowerShell tab? Do I want this to be a command prompt tab? Do I want this to be Azure Cloud Shell? And of course, you can mix and match. But it's just a fantastic tool that every sysadmin should be using if you're not already using it today and taking full advantage of it. To go along with Terminal is one of my favorite new features of Windows Server 2025, Winget. So we've got integrated package management capabilities. Guess what? A lot of people are used to apt-get on the Linux side. And so people were saying, you know, it'd be great if I had some sort of solution on Windows. Well, with Winget, you get package management. You can search for software, you can install software, you can upgrade software. It can be very granular. You can automate it. You can interact with the command prompt or PowerShell. It's free and open source. And just to give you an example of how it can be useful for you, especially for IT pros and sysadmins, here's a quick demo. I'm going to do a Winget search for sysinternals, because who doesn't use sysinternals as an IT pro? And I can install the entire suite, or if I want to pick specific parts of it, I can just actually pipe all three of them in there, and it will install Process Monitor, Process Explorer, and TCP View. And so it's actually installing each of those. I decided to install the individual ones. I didn't want the whole package. And now there's the very first one. There's Process Monitor. I'm going to pin that to my taskbar since I use that regularly. Here's Process Explorer. And again, you can see that the command line alias was added. So I went back to my command line and fired up. Here comes Process Explorer. And again, I'm going to pin that to the taskbar as well. So very quick, very easy. Now, of course, you know, I want to use very common tools like SQL Server, for example. So I did a quick search for SQL, and you can see SQLite, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server 2017, 2022, Developer and Express. I'm going to go ahead and install SQL Server 2022 Express. So it's literally install, copy and paste the string, and now I'm going to go through the process of installing SQL Server right here. And the beauty of Winget package management is also I can use it to upgrade all of the packages. I can say with Winget, upgrade all. And it will look at all of the packages that have been installed through Winget, and it will upgrade them, all of them, in all very quickly and easily through the Winget command prompt. So really cool new powerful feature built into Windows Terminal with Winget. Also want to point out a new purchasing model. Just really quickly, why this is about. There's a number of folks that have basically come to us and said, look, you know, there are cases where I bought Windows Server Standard, and it comes with 2 VMs, 2 licenses, and I realized something. It's the holiday season. I need another VM or 2, and I don't want to buy another copy because I'm only going to need it for like, November, December, January, February, probably be done with it by March. So I only need it for a few months. It'd be nice if I could just use Windows Server and just license it on a monthly basis, and when I'm done, just shut it off and not have to pay for it again. Well, that's exactly what pay-as-you-go is. It's basically a subscription-based license, and again, this is all in addition to the perpetual licensing. Nothing has changed on that side. It's just a new option for people that say, hey, you know what, I'd like to license Windows Server by the month. We do this for Azure Stack HCI already. We do this for SQL Server. It's billed through Azure. It also makes it simple. It also makes it easier when you're working with hosters, because you don't have to worry about keys and management and stuff like that with hosters. You can literally say, oh, I'm just going to use the pay-as-you-go with in a hosting environment, and when I'm done, shut it off. And the hoster doesn't have to deal with any licensing or key management because you're doing it all on yourself on the pay-as-you-go side. So again, great for temporary bursts, and again, largely if you've got Windows Server Standard Edition. So That's the pay-as-you-go. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that System Center 2025 is available now. So as a reminder, we release Windows Server every 2 to 3 years like clockwork. So we had 2016, 2019, 2022, 2025. Gosh, I wonder when the next version of Windows Server will be. Gosh, that's a brain teaser, huh? Well, System Center, we do the same thing. 2016, 2019, 2022, 2025. And guess what? It's released on the same day because we want to make sure that you guys can begin deploying Windows Server 2025 as quickly as possible. Now, the other question I already get asked is, now that Windows Server has gone GA, what does that mean for example, for a bunch of Microsoft's own first-party server products like System Center, SQL Server, Exchange, and SharePoint? Well, again, System Center is available now. SQL Server supports 2019 and 2022. Those are ready to go. Exchange and SharePoint, they will have support for 2025 by the end of the calendar year. So we're all in alignment. Everything's moving. Everything's rocking and rolling. If you're not evaluating Windows Server 2025 for hot patching, for the performance improvements, for the SDN, for the integrated network controller, for the GPUP, for the massive improvements in Active Directory, for the massive security hardening in SMB and in the file server, I'm just getting warmed up, folks, you should. You really should. It's an embarrassment of riches in Windows Server 2025. So please, software assurance customers, if you're an SA customer, by the way, you already have these bits. You already own it. If you're an SA customer, please get started right now with 2025. For folks that don't, you can download the Windows Server 2025 evaluation. You can also connect your hybrid servers with Azure Arc. So with that, software assurance rights, again, SA customers, you have these bits available now, and upgrading is easier, and the evaluation bits are ready to go. So just a reminder, the key areas in Windows Server 2025, really we looked across the board. We looked at, again, your feature requests. I started off with that slide very early on that talked about your feature requests, which were hot patching, better security, network improvements, better manageability, easier upgrades. We delivered it all in spades and a whole bunch more. Advanced multi-layer security, I'm really proud because there's a bunch of areas where literally just by installing Windows Server 2025, you've hardened your file servers because they've got hardened defaults in the firewall, in the protocols, in the file server itself. The same is true for Active Directory with better crypto, better encryption, better security, better hardened by defaults when you deploy Windows Server 2025. High performance future ready platform. Again, Dan talked about the improvements in storage. Just by going from 2022 to 2025, you're going to see an over 60% performance improvement in storage performance with NVMe Flash. That is pretty awesome. Just literally by upgrading my server, I'm getting massive new performance when it comes to storage. On the SDN side, the fact that the network controller is now integrated into the platform. You don't need to have a virtual machine running as your network controller for SDN anymore. It's actually a native service, which means you don't have to manage it, you don't have to patch it, and you get better performance. And of course, Hyper-V, the scalability numbers are crazy. And the reason why, because quite simply, Azure needed those scalability numbers. They've been using that for fat scale for quite a while, and we're bringing it on premises in Windows Server 2025. And of course, GPUP, so that you can take advantage, actually partition GPUs, use them in virtual machines, use them for AI, for virtual desktops, take advantage of that GPU power in your servers, and still have the flexibility of migration with live migration and high availability. And then cloud agility anywhere. There's a bunch of things we've done, like making Azure Arc enablement even easier. We didn't have time to cover it today, but we've actually made improvements in Azure Files as well with our file server to sync into the cloud. We've got some great new options there, and we're simply just going to continue this level of innovation. So as Ian said at the very beginning, I want to say now a huge thank you to all of you. This release is for you. This release was driven by you. Your input, your surveys, your feedback is what drove all of the features and capabilities, and we're excited about this release and are eager to hear your feedback and comments so we can start working, well, we've already started working on, so we can integrate that into the next major version of Windows Server. And with that, thank you very much and hope you enjoy the rest of your time this week here at Microsoft Ignite.